Philip is one of the most polarizing characters in the Thomas franchise. Everyone seems to be very black or white with him. You either really love him to death, or you really hate him and want to see him die. But is there a more nuanced way we can look at it? Words I would use to describe Philip as are loud, childish, playful, dynamic, ugly, brash, and little. Now, if you like these character traits, then congratulations, you probably like Philip. But I think in order to understand Philip, we need to go back to the beginning. Philip's first appearance was in The Little Engine Who Raced Ahead. I like how we meet Philip right off the bat. In the first 40 seconds, notice. We jump straight into the plot. It's good because the audience is just as surprised as Thomas and Percy. Now, Philip is very important to the arc of Thomas. He represents how much Thomas has grown. Thomas used to be the new shunter in the yard, now it's Philip. Thomas ran into the junction his first day, now it's Philip. Thomas saved James, Philip saved James. You get the point. You get the sense that Philip is a younger and less mature version of Thomas. Edward is Thomas, as to Thomas is Philip. I love that they brought in this character that's even younger than Thomas and Percy. It really shows how far they've grown.
That little foxcap can be very cheeky sometimes.
We even see Thomas give advice to Philip.
Don't mind him, Philip. He's just grumpy because he has to pull trucks.
Thomas really took on Edward's role from The Adventure Begins. Philip's stories really act as a sequel to the special. After all, they did come out the same year, and this idea is cemented by Edward.
Reminds me of a little tank engine who wanted to see the world.
Just beautiful. However, I don't think Philip is perfect. You see, my main issue with Philip is that he never receives any sort of consequence for his action, which is very important when dealing with a child character. Like, look at Thomas and Gordon for a second. Thomas was rude and cheeky, he'd whistle and wake Gordon up, and then Gordon acted out his revenge, teaching Thomas a valuable lesson. Whereas here, Philip is brash, overconfident, he wakes Gordon up, but he doesn't receive any sort of consequence for his action. And he always brags about winning this race that Gordon wasn't even participating in. Here's how Thomas's episode ended.
He went home very slowly and was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again.
And here's how Philip's episode ended.
I mean, we can have another race if you want to, but don't forget, I still beat you the first time.
It's so annoying. Why don't they punish Philip in the same way they punish others? It also doesn't help that every Philip appearance after this references that episode. It's a subtle reminder of his lack of punishment. I think Philip's next episode was much better. For a start, I feel like James got what he deserved. He was overconfident, took too many trucks to show off, and paid the price for it. Although, I do think this episode is good, and I like a lot of the sequences in it. I feel like maybe this episode should have been about Philip. Like, maybe Philip takes too many trucks, he'd crash and learn his lesson. Because we've kind of already seen this story from James. And this is Philip's, second episode, so I don't see why they couldn't have done that with him. Why Philip couldn't fail, I'll never understand. I just kind of wish they'd given him some consequences in these first two episodes. Now, I think The Great Race is what really cemented everyone's hatred of Philip. He feels very shoehorned in this movie. Now, having Philip play a big role in a special isn't necessarily a bad idea. After all, we do associate him with racing. And there's some nice scenes in here with him. Philip bonding with Gordon, that's cute. And I like the joke with Percy.
The Great Race is about to begin in 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen.
How did you make your voice do that, Philip?
I like that him and Henry got an interaction.
I came fifth.
Wow, that's great.
There were only 5 engines.
I like how they use him as a bit of a punching bag. My main issue I have with Philip in this movie is that he doesn't really add anything to the story. He doesn't grow or learn anything during the movie, especially with the amount of screen time he got. For example, at the start of the movie, Philip tells Thomas to stay away from Ashima.
My advice to you, Thomas, is to keep away from her. Engines like that are nothing but trouble.
But later, during the shunting competition, when Vinny is threatening Philip, Thomas and Ashima step in and save him. Then, when Thomas lets Ashima win the shunting race, Philip says,
I told him she was trouble.
Really, Philip? Really? After she saved you? After she pulled Vinny away from you? After she risked her place in the shunting competition for you? Really? This isn't how a character arc works. Why couldn't Philip just be upset for both of them? Besides that one scene, Philip was mostly redundant in the movie. Ugh, I just wish Brenner would write a really good Philip episode. Oh,
Toby's new friend.
thanks, Brenner. Toby's new friend, in my opinion, is the best Philip episode. For once, we actually get to see Philip face some consequences for his actions. We get to see Philip deal with rejection, a very universal problem. But the main reason I think this is the best Philip episode is the dynamic between Philip and Toby. Toby is portrayed as very traditional and stuck in his ways. He just wants to trundle along the line and enjoy life. And then comes along this box cab. I love how quick the dialogue is in this scene.
Hello, Toby.
Oh.
My name's Philip.
Hello.
You like racing? I love racing. Did you hear about the race I had with Gordon? Guess what? I won.
I also like how reminiscent this scene is from when we first meet Philip. Very chaotic. Just jumps right in. Philip really plays the child character here, which I think is the role that Philip was born to play. And having Henrietta play the mother role is just the icing on the cake. Toby really feels in character here. He's just so done with Philip. Like when Philip tries to race him and he doesn't even budge an inch. It's the funniest thing ever. This episode is the king of show don't tell. Philip was winning the race, but he slowed down to let Toby get ahead. Young Philip would have never done that. That's just such wonderful, subtle character growth. It's also interesting how Toby and Philip change each other for the better. Toby would have never raced, but he did because of Philip. Philip would have never slowed down, but he did because of Toby. Toby and Henrietta have always functioned as an old married couple in the show, and Philip has always functioned as the child character. So giving them to Philip was really like giving them a child. Henrietta functions as the mother, Philip functions as the child, and Toby functions as the stepfather. Having children can really transform someone's outlook on life, and I think Andrew Brenner, the writer of the episode, being a father and a married man, really understood that. I also love the lesson of this one, that people who are different can still be friends, or tolerate each other. That's a really good lesson that applies to so many aspects of the world. We all have to live with each other. So I think this is a lesson that really hits home. I really wish this was the episode where they stopped using Philip, because I feel like they had pretty much done everything that they needed to do with the character. He got a parallel with Thomas, he interacted with Edward, got a joke with Henry, had development with Gordon, had an episode with James, a joke with Percy, a scene with Emily, and a really cool parent-child dynamic with Toby and Henrietta. But unfortunately, the shoehorning continued. Engine of the Future is very much in the same vein as The Great Race. Philip feels very shoehorned in this episode. Brenner even makes a joke out of it.
And I'm coming too! Just because!
You can really tell when the writers want to use him as a character, and when they were told to use him as a character. By the time we get to Philip's number, I feel like they're grasping at straws with what to do with Philip. The writers were like, let's do an episode about a number. I don't know. This isn't an episode of Thomas. This is a trains video, complete with multiple Philips, floating trucks, Batman logos, and a what he sees versus what she sees joke. Despite not liking this episode very much, one thing I can appreciate about it is the characters. We get callbacks to Thomas and Philip's dynamic, Toby and Henrietta show up again, and we even get some closure on Gordon and Philip's relationship. We also get to see Philip interact with Diesels for the first time, which is a really interesting concept, and in a lot of ways I kind of would have preferred if this episode had been about that. Okay, now we get to the infamous one, A Shed for Edward, the episode where they paired up Edward with Philip and wrote him off the show. Now, I actually think pairing up Philip with Edward for an episode would be a really interesting idea, because Philip is the archetypal young character, and Edward is the archetypal old character. And Philip was meant to be a parallel to Thomas in The Adventure Begins, so doing that with Edward makes some sort of sense. And 68 plus 2 equals 70, which was Thomas's number in The Adventure Begins. But then you get a lot of trade-offs, like every other Philip appearance before this has had him at Knapford. So why does he sleep at Wellsford? That doesn't make any sense. Why couldn't Philip's number explain this? I think the real reason why Brenner and the team paired up Edward and Philip together was because they knew that Mattel didn't want to push Edward as a character, but Mattel did want to push Philip as a character. So, by pairing up Edward and Philip, it'd hopefully keep Edward relevant in the series' future. Of course, with hindsight, we know that didn't really work out. The Edward and Philip dynamic could have been something great. Edward has always come off to me as a bit spineless. Unlike Toby, who's rude and will let you know it, Edward is very nice and polite to everyone, even characters that aren't necessarily deserving of politeness. So pairing him up with someone like Philip would really help build his character and form him into more of a Gordon type, which is something Edward desperately needed to do. And Philip could have learned so much from Edward too, but no. This is the only episode exploring their dynamic, and much of it is just about Edward being away from Philip. I kind of feel like having Edward be Philip's mentor sort of takes that role away from Thomas. Having Thomas be the mentor to Philip sort of was a good thing for Thomas, but now that you're giving that to Edward, you're kind of doing something you've already done with Edward, and you're kind of taking something away from Thomas. And also, when I think of yellow young characters that you pair up with Edward, I don't think of Philip. I think of Bill and Ben. And personally, I think if you were going to write off Edward, I think Bill and Ben would have been a much better idea, because they are actually based in Wellsford first and foremost. But also, in season 22, Edward actually gets an episode with Bill and Ben, so it would have been just better narratively, you know. In series 22, Philip appeared in the Damage Control episode, where Brenner recycles the Percy jug from the Great Race.
The Bat Controller says you're causing
Confusion and delay.
Wow, Philip, how do you make your voice do that?
Like, why? Why did you do that? And we also got Apologia Possible, which I think is the most sympathetic portrayal of Philip. It was so great to see Philip grow as a character and get much needed development. It's crazy to think out of himself and James that Philip was the bigger engine. It's also a real testament to how far Philip has come as a character. I love that scene where Philip stands up to James. He goes from weak to a force to be reckoned with. I love it. I want to say this is a good episode so badly, but James is just so insufferable in this one. Oh my god, he's like a caricature of James. Did we really need another James Philip episode? Personally, I think Diesel would have worked much better as a foil for Philip. Like, maybe Diesel is making fun of Philip for not being a very respectable Diesel because he hangs out with steam engines and is very nice. And then all gets to a head when him and Philip are like lined up in the same way that him and James were. And then by the end of the episode, Philip proves that he's the bigger engine and all the Diesels respect him. I feel like that would have been a much better way to send off his character. But yeah, one can dream. I think Apologia Possible was a nice last episode for Philip. Even if James is over the top, I still think it's a good Philip episode. So I won't lie, when I started making this video, I really wanted to rag on Philip. And I certainly did my fair share of ragging. But honestly, the more I watched Philip, the more he kind of grew on me. I don't know, there's something about him that's kind of infectious. I tend to go back and forth on how I feel about him. You know, I think of a funny scene and I'll go, oh, I love Philip. Then I'll think of something annoying he did in another episode and I'll go, oh, I hate Philip. But that's the good thing about Philip, that he has range. He isn't wishy-washy. You know, he actually provokes something inside of you. You either really hate him or you really love him. And that's a sign of a good character, I think. Because you don't want someone who's in the middle of the road. You want someone who can really have an effect on you. Some people say that Philip is a child, and if you don't like him, then you don't like children. But, you know, like Thomas and Percy were children, and, you know, we still like them. So what's the difference between them and Philip specifically? I think it helps that Thomas and Percy got their comeuppance and had moments that humbled them. Philip never really got his humbling moment. He was more of a slow burn character. His development is a lot more gradual. His development is the status quo. He was a character that was founded on change. He started out as a very flawed protagonist, and unfortunately, he kind of got stuck with that label. And by the time he started to change and grow, it was too late. Fans had already pigeonholed him. I think that was the mistake of his first few episodes. You need to start off your character with flaws, yes, but it's also very important to show growth just a little bit. Not a complete 180, but just enough to make you root for the character. If you don't do that, then you lose the protagonist's journey. And by losing the protagonist, you will turn them into an antagonist. And that is why people hate Philip.